Magandang umaga po sa inyong lahat. Bonjour. Guten Morgen. Buona diminazza. Well, ohayo gozaimasu. I would like to thank, first of all, the Asia CEO Forum of Chair Associates, and of course, Rebecca, the boss of Mr. Mills, for the invitation to address today's event. I'm delighted to continue meeting such outstanding and dedicated Filipino women active in the various professions and industry. As I myself continue to serve the country with a very special interest and focus on gender-related issues, even after retirement from government service as a diplomat for 43 years. I started when I was 5. As this is the first event, I understand, organized by the Forum, focused on women, let me be, as I told Rebecca, I'll be close and personal in my approach to this sharing and connecting session. However, to put context to what I'm going to speak about, let me define a word which I normally don't use, but I think to put context in what I'm going to speak about, to define the word empowerment. It's defined as a process and the outcome of a process by which women challenge gender-based discrimination in all institutions and structures of society. Let me then begin my discourse with a short story. Chapter 1. Once upon a time, Filipino women diplomats were denied certain rights which their male counterparts enjoyed. Among these rights was the fact that she was not allowed to marry the man of her choice if he happens to be a non-Filipino. However, the male diplomat could marry anyone he chose, even to have a foreign wife. The rule or the practice was very tricky. For whatever reason, the Department of Foreign Affairs required both men and women to submit 2 letters before they could marry, namely, a letter of request for permission to marry. Has any one of you written such a letter? And secondly, a letter of resignation to go along with that letter of request. In practice, the men were given the permission to marry, while the women got the acceptance of their letter of resignation. Obviously, the decision was grossly discriminatory. This was the practice for 4 decades since we started the Department of Foreign Affairs until the late 1970s when I raised the question, why should women be treated differently from the men? After all, she had to comply with the same requirements as the men to enter the Foreign Service. We all had to pass the same rigid examinations, both written and oral. During my time, you were about 420 to take the Foreign Service exams. 28 passed, and out of the 28, 18 were women. Besides, as you know, in these examinations, the women surpassed the men in their scores. This malpractice has led several of our brilliant young women who spent years preparing to become diplomats only to resign when they fall in love. Others have opted to stay single for the rest of their professional life. So you see a lot of them in our service still. Then one day, as the story goes, the United Nations Commission on the Status of Women decided to adopt the Declaration on the Elimination of Discrimination Against Women. This declaration, and you will be very proud of her, was initiated by Ambassador Leticia Ramos Shahani. However, it was too late for her to use it because her husband had died, who was an Indian, before she entered the Foreign Service. She led the commission and she was assisted by a strong team of what I call the true believers in equal rights, responsibilities, and privileges of women, who worked assiduously to draft a meaningful and an all-encompassing declaration for all women of the world. You can be very proud. That was a Philippine product. Note that this international declaration was drafted by one woman in the Department of Foreign Affairs who just passed her bar, Attorney Minerva Falcon. So this document really was born in Padre Faura. These were the days when distinguished women leaders from the Philippines led and gave directions to issues that affected women not only in the Philippines but around the world. To mention a few of these wonderful women, Dr. Stefania Aldabalim, who took great interest in the concerns of women and children, who became one of the first global ambassadors for UNICEF. Then you have Dr. Mercedes Concepcion, a respected scientist on population and human development issues, who chaired the first United Nations Conference on Population. Then you have Helena Benitez, a leading star in the field of education and environment, who led the first woman to lead the UN Environment Program Agency, UNEP. In those days, I was a young assistant advisor to the rapporteur of the United Nations Commission on the Status of Women, Ambassador Shahani. So I had the unique opportunity to learn by heart the spirit of the Declaration on the Elimination of Discrimination Against Women. Little did I know that the Declaration became my legal and moral weapon in my quest for the application of human equal rights for the women of the Philippine Foreign Service. I must admit, however, that it was not as simple as applying the provisions of the Declaration. Back home, the challenge was an uphill battle. For many years, my written request to marry, a German, was not entered into the agenda of the Board of Foreign Service. It was one of those bureaucratic techniques or tricks that's used to try your patience, hoping that you would simply give up and walk away. But I suppose a woman's patience is a virtue that has worked wonders through the ages, di ba? Certainly, I do not deny that there were trying moments when I was close to saying, goodbye, Foreign Service, welcome, motherhood. My window of opportunity came when the women I respected and had the privilege to work with, whose names I gave you earlier, gave me all the support that I needed to withstand the hurdles of a bureaucracy. The break came when Beth De Romulo, I'm sure you've heard about Beth De Romulo, assured me that she was with me and encouraged me to push ahead with my quest, like Don Quixote. She understood my dilemma. After all, like her, 20 other foreign women were already married to Filipino male diplomats, including Secretary of Foreign Affairs Carlos P. Romulo. Call it networking, call it collective energy, call it mentoring. But women do have the humility to ask and modesty and perhaps honesty to accept help from others. No egos. It took me a few years to make a convincing case before the Board of Foreign Service. But I tell you, it was well worth it. But this story does not end with a fairy tale cliche and they lived happily ever after. The challenges came when we decided to have a family. As we lived in two separate continents, someone had to adjust more than the other. We had to compromise and manage our time more systematically. Simply put, it was a matter of give and take relationship. Another break came when the Department of Foreign Affairs needed a German-speaking officer who was experienced enough to assist a chain of political ambassadors who were novices to the job. I was fortunate and perhaps had the foresight to learn and master my husband's language and culture, that the assignment to Germany was a perfect fit. Even his job as chief editor of German television was relevant to my work. In 1986, his television team succeeded to make a substantial documentary film on people power, and I entitled it The Gentle Revolution. In German, it sounds better. Die sanfte Revolution. Politically, the film introduced a very positive face of the Filipino to the European public. And last night, which was the 20th anniversary of the death of Betty Go Belmonte, I was able to share the story that thanks to her, my husband could do the film just during and after the People Power Revolution, which she arranged very, very methodically and just like a woman, very passionately. Indeed, a well-adjusted family life gave me all the support I needed to make it even to the top. When I announced to my husband that I was being promoted as Secretary of Foreign Affairs, his question was, what happens to our holidays? Of course, I said, sorry, they're gone. Meanwhile, he took early retirement to be with the family in the Philippines and subsequently to my postings in Australia and Germany. Today, years after my démarche to challenge what I considered a blatant unequal treatment of women, we find in the Philippine Foreign Service names like Ambassador Maria Fe Klingert, married to a Danish. Ambassador Maria Zenaida Collinson, married to an Englishman. Minister Councilor Jennifer West, married to an American. Officer Micah Fisher, married to a German. And a number of others whose personal choices were finally respected by the Department of Foreign Affairs and the Philippine government based on the landmark decision of my seemingly quixotic charge, which served ultimately as a precedent to the permission to marry. Now to chapter 2 of our story. I must confess, it was not an accident that I became a diplomat. I admit I was rather organized, focused, and consequent, and guided by my formula of 5 Ds. I like the letter D for obvious reasons. First was the dream to be a diplomat. Then the second D was the desire to share the Philippines with the world and the world to the Philippines. Then I had direction, to be well equipped and the proper expertise such as academic qualifications and language proficiencies. Fourth was determination to succeed. And fifth is dedication to selfless performance of a mission to serve the country and its people, and which I continue to do this day, when SGV founder, Mr. Washington Sisip, who calls me his boss, isn't that nice, invited me to, quote, continue serving the country soon after my retirement, or the day after I retired, I joined SGB. What I have described this morning was just one of the many challenges that came my way in my chosen field of diplomacy as I moved from the bottom of the totem pole as an office assistant to the Secretary of Foreign Affairs to become the Secretary of Foreign Affairs myself within a period of 36 years. But each time I faced seemingly insurmountable hurdles, including saving the life of Angelo de la Cruz, if you remember, from his captors in Iraq. For a diplomat, saving the life of a countryman was the greatest challenge and the greatest privilege you can take on as somebody who serves the country. I remember, whenever I have these challenges, what Eleanor Roosevelt casually said of women. She said, a woman is like a tea bag. How do you like being compared to a tea bag? You never know how strong she is until she gets in hot water. Thank you for listening to my story, which continues to evolve as I undertake projects to bring the world into recognizing the Filipino woman as an achiever and her professional life. While the World Economic Forum Gender Equity Index, which was presented to you earlier, we have been in it for the past 10 years. That's what I've been following all the time in the World Economic Forum. How did we make it there? It was based on 4 criteria. The participation of women in political life, participation of women in economic life, our health condition, and our education. While we do and celebrate that we're high up there in this index, for me, the challenge is to narrow the gap between women like you who have it and the women, the majority of our women, who are still struggling to make ends meet to survive. As a diplomat, while the ambassador is a woman, many of my problems were with our women workers who suffer a lot and who, of course, give the picture that the country is not able to keep these wonderful women at home to continue a life that they could be with their families and contribute to the local community. This is a challenge that I find myself deeply involved in today, to seek possibilities to narrow that gap between us women and among us women in the Philippines. It is for this reason that since my retirement from the world stage, if you want to call it, I have devoted myself to actively supporting women's groups through advocacies and programs to address this gap, this glaring gap in our society, through such platforms as the Great Women Project. How do you like my pin? Great Women means gender responsive economic actions for the transformation of women. Isn't that beautiful? This is a platform that is done in conjunction between the private and the government sector to bring the woman up the ladder in so many ways. I think that will need another convention to discuss. I have founded the Diwata movement, which is Women in Resource Development, to echo what Nelson Mandela has always done for South Africa when he said to address poverty, you must first create wealth. How do you do that? You use your natural and human resources. Again, that's another convention theme. Then we have organized the Business and Professional Women, and today I had to rush to write my check to help a Filipino woman victim of Typhoon Yolanda. And if you want to help any of these girls who want to finish their schooling but have lost the wherewithal to do so, one of the officers of the UP Alumni Association is here. She can tell you all about it. For a few hundreds of pesos, you can help another woman finish her course at the University of the Philippines. I would also like to announce at this point that to keep our image going out there, I'm in the advisory council of several international women's groups. Those of you who want to join me in Paris in June, please contact me. It's from the 5th to the 7th of June, and you will meet fascinating women from around the world. Our theme is Women Redesigning Economies and Societies. Before that, I bring some women to Korea for the Business and Professional Women from the 23rd to the 27th of May. Why do I do this? Because while we recognize that we've done a lot, the world scene has not seen you. They want to meet you. They meet the women who are working in their homes, the women who work in the factories, etc. They have not met professional women like you. When I announce this, people tell me, ang mahal naman, I have to pay $500 to attend that. I said, how much did you pay for your bag? Ladies, it's a question of priorities. In thanking you all for being here, and I'm so excited to meet all of you. You cannot imagine how good I feel to see such bright faces, such go-go feeling which I sense when I enter the room. I would like further to invite you to be part of our efforts in 2015 when the Philippines will again host APEC. And when the women take on a challenging theme, which I suggested yesterday, my theme, and I hope it gets approved, is Women Reshaping APEC. We have to show that we can reshape society. Help us make this happen for the women and for the inclusive growth of this country, our country, a country I have been very fortunate to serve for more than 45 years. Thank you very much.